Following Mr. Brock's line of questioning, just to put a fine point on it, can you please provide to this committee in writing a detailed breakdown of monthly costs associated with both locations and all costs, any taxes, any condo fees, any co-op fees, utilities, a clear breakdown for both locations, all the information you have. You'll be able to provide that to the committee within the usual timeline?
Mr. Chair, as already mentioned, we can provide the option analysis, which actually include the net present value, that it should be including all that information. I also would like to clarify that...
No, that's fine. It's my time. You're going to provide all that information that I requested in writing. Thank you. My next question is... just start with
order, Mr. Chair. I thought there was a statement that was going to clarify what Mr. Genis was asking, and I would like to hear it.
Well,
you can. I'm sorry. I'll address this, Mr. Longfield. You can hear it during your time, but this is Mr. Genis' time, please. Thank you.
People who have been
Go ahead,
for a long time have complete ignorance of the rules. Chair, how much time do I have left?
4 minutes.
Thank you.
Point of order. I don't appreciate the comment that Mr. Genis just made to an honorable member.
Okay, excuse me.
Nonsense.
I'll declare, Mr. Longfield, that's not a point of order. Appreciate it, but we understand the sentiment. Mr. Genis, continue with your time, please.
Thank you. Just to the witnesses, I do want to say I think it's pretty disingenuous to project cost savings based on a comparison of purchase price in one case with asking price in another. That's clearly an apples to orange comparison. Maybe more precisely, an apples to magic apples comparison. You've set an asking price for the old property at 550 Park Avenue, but that asking price is not the same as the appraised value. We heard that yesterday. My research team looked at other properties being sold at 550 Park Avenue. All of them have sold substantially below asking price if they were sold at all. In many cases, they were sold at reduced price. There was a reduced price, and then they were taken off the market and not sold. And just for your reference, we looked at units number 10, 2W, 17E, 11W, 12A, 16AE, and 6W, all cases where they were reduced in price and not sold, or they sold at a substantially reduced price below the asking price. So your fake math of asking price comparison to the purchase price is pretty thin. If you wanted to show that this was a good transaction, if you wanted to show that there were savings, I'd like to know why in the world didn't you just sell the existing property first before purchasing the new property? That would have given you a sense of what your actual comparison was in terms of numbers. Why did you wait to even list the old property until you purchased the new one?
Chair, I welcome the question. Let's remember that the residence is a place of work. So it's not just like a pure residence. So we actually needed business continuity. If we would have sold the actual residence, we would have actually have to lease another location so we ensure business continuity, which is why we didn't do that.
Sir, you have multiple different locations where you can hold events. So for an interim period of a few months, you could have used many other spaces in New York, the consulate itself, space that's available to the UN ambassador. You could have hosted other events in other locations. In fact, most of the hospitality expenses for Mr. Clark involve restaurants. You are frequently hosting events in restaurants. So that excuse isn't going to fool anyone either, sir. Why could you not at least secure a buyer for the old location before moving to the new location instead of coming to committee with this fake comparison of apples and oranges?
Mr. Chair, I will go back to the criteria that we've talked about when we select a location. It's about not only location, but security.
The question is, why didn't you sell first?
And business continuity to ensure also that it met the criteria for the location.
But there are so many other locations in New York where you could have events. Another question in the same vein. Is your analysis of numbers predicated on Park Avenue property selling by within a certain time frame? You told us about certain potential alleged savings. Is that predicated on it selling within a certain time frame?
Mr. Chair, welcome. The question, this saving that we have presented in our net present value is not tied to a specific sale of the current condo. Thank you.
Well, that doesn't make any sense then, because you have ongoing carrying costs associated with both properties for as long as you own them. Now, in the context of selling one property and purchasing another in New York, the government of Canada may have had to pay, but may have been exempt from the following: capital gains tax, the U.S. Foreign Investment and Real Property Tax Act, state and city transfer taxes, New York's mansion tax. Which of these taxes or costs did you have to pay, and which, if any, were you exempt from?
I'm afraid time has not been left for an answer, so we'll get back to it again, or perhaps you can commit to put that in writing to us. Mr. Longfield, welcome to OGO. Now it's your turn. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think it's okay that we've just cut to the next speaker, since he wasn't being allowed to answer questions in the first place. But maybe I could go to the statement earlier about the life cycle of the building itself, looking at 55 to 60 years. To put that into context, I visited many council offices in my role as Member of Parliament. One of them was the Council Office of India, and it was next door to the Leader of the Opposition's house, who was Andrew Scheer at the time. And the Consul General was Vikas Swarup, who was working with me and with the University of Guelph to facilitate the setting up of a Center for Indian Studies at the University of Guelph. And the University of Guelph has subsequently started that center, and also has appointed an interim chair for Indian Studies that's visiting from India. So the important work that goes in a council office is not strictly entertainment. There is some socializing, and it's a different venue where we talked about jazz that night as well, but we were really focused on creating a Center for Indian Studies at the University of Guelph. Since then, we've had a change in the Leader of the Opposition, and we've had a change in the Consul General from India. What's a normal time for a Consul General to occupy one of the residences that their government provides?
Mr. Chair, I welcome the question. I will actually turn to my colleague, DG of North America, Mark Allen, that can talk about these operations.
We've recently established set timeframes for diplomatic postings, and in the United States, it is 4 years.
Terrific. So, I mean, part of the arguments that the Conservatives is making is that this is a house that the Prime Minister is giving one of his buddies, one that was also a moderator at the Conservative Leadership Convention, which kind of disconnects. Is any staff involved, including the acting government lead at the consular office, is any staff involved in the selection of properties?
Mr. Chair, once again, I welcome the question. The process, the decision-making is all managed at HQ, and there's no influence by any other staff than the people responsible for the stewardship of the real property.
Great, thank you. And also, I know we will be getting some of this in writing as was requested, but the cost savings that have been determined by the independent body, not a political organization that's giving us money as a Liberal government, the cost savings of a smaller location versus the location that we were occupying since the 60s. Could you maybe comment on, just in general, how there was a cost savings? I know we will be getting details.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I will turn to my colleague Robin, because indeed we have downsized, and there are going to be a definite saving that's going to be tied to this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question is about the cost savings, and of course, when you look at the cost of renovating and aging property, this is a cost that you're going to be not really recuperating, because you're only bringing an asset back to where it should have been, investing or putting down $2.6 million in this case. So that saving alone is quite significant. But if you look at the difference in prices as well, we're anticipating quite a substantial profit out of the transaction. So those are the two elements for savings, in addition to the ongoing savings that you mentioned.
Thank you. And one quick question on the future of diplomacy. The report that was tabled in the House about a year ago, how does this transaction match up with the study that was approved by the Senate as well as by the Parliamentary Committee, the House of Commons Committee?
Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the question. This investment actually very much aligned with the future of diplomacy, not only on the what we actually are going towards to in terms of like investment, but also on the how, the introduction of agility, effectiveness, cost effectiveness, and again, value for money.
Thanks very much.
Terrific.
That is
Thank
our
you.
time, sir. Mrs.
Thank you,
Vignola,
Chair.
please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. What I took from your remarks as well, Mr. Cousineau, is that one of the problems with the current location is that it is a co-op, and that perhaps members of the homeowners association, this co-op association, may have been bothered about the fact that events were being held at this residence. I imagine that the situation has changed greatly over the last 60 years to cause this to be a problem. Is that not so? Thank you, Chair. Yes, indeed, members of the board changed. And we have seen over the last few years is that the rules became more strict. Things became more delicate over the years. And that was indeed another factor, in addition to the cost and other factors that I mentioned. That's what led to us taking this decision. And so Canada's government was also part of this co-op, I imagine, and yet its voice didn't have much impact. Well, I'll just ask Robert to answer the question. But indeed, we're part of that group. So we're one of the votes. But it's a big building, so we're only one of the votes. Thank you. In New York, in Manhattan, there are 3 types of unit: co-ops, condos, and apartment buildings, each of which have their own ways of proceeding. But in this case, we have seen that there are no semi-detached residences. So is that a possible procedure? Is that possible that a government could own such a residence and manage it itself? Well, that's one possible way to look at the situation, but there are matters of security to consider. I would ask my colleague, Mr. Dubois, to answer. Yes, it's a good question. We're not against the idea of buying a semi-detached property. But the thing with these semi-detached properties is that they are both more costly because you have your own address and you're responsible for maintenance not only of the inside, but as well of the outer frame of the building. So it's often very costly. In addition, because it's usually at ground level, a semi-detached means that we need to take costly security measures. So it's difficult in general to opt for a semi-detached.
Mr. Bachrach.
Thank you very much, Chair. And, we've heard in previous testimony that Steinway Hall, which I believe is the heritage building that the new apartment is located in, is somewhat different from Steinway Tower. However, they're connected and associated. And I guess my first question is whether they share the same residential address.
Mr. Chair, the answer is simple. Yeah, actually, the annex, which is the skyscraper, was the new annex that was added later on, and it is the same address.
So Steinway Tower, Mr. Cousineau, has been a somewhat controversial building. I was reading in one report that according to the Manhattan District Attorney, the construction company that built Steinway Tower, Parkside Construction, and its affiliates stole more than $1.7 million in wages over 3 years from about 520 workers at the tower and 7 other high-rise buildings. And the company also hid nearly $42 million in wages from state insurance officials to avoid paying millions in workers' compensation premiums. Was Global Affairs aware of this controversy during the evaluation process? And was the controversy around the construction of Steinway Tower considered as a risk factor when it came to the perception and brand image that would come with locating Global Affairs operations at that address?
Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the question. Once again, as pointed out, there is the Steinway Tower and there is the Steinway Hall. So we're not staying in that Steiner Tower, sorry. Personally, I was not aware of this information.
Okay, so I can assume that it didn't, like it feels like a little bit of a, splitting hairs to distinguish between the tower and the hall, given that they're connected and they share the same residential address. I guess the question is whether it came up during discussions as a potential risk factor, particularly the message that it sends to working people that Global Affairs was willing to locate in a building with such a controversial history. And I take from your comments that that didn't come up in the discussions around the purchase.
Brief answer, please.
Mr. Chair, again, our focus is on stewardship and value for money. We've looked at the Steinway Hall, and I couldn't speak about that information is being shared today. I was not aware.
Thanks very much.